All right, what's up, everybody? We're gonna get a packed house for Jason. Yeah, everyday problems. Everyday problems. We got some great questions here on the left-hand side. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I just
Perfect.
quit the browser and started over again. So okay, here we are. So
Well,
everybody,
welcome to Products on Live. Thank you for coming on.
of course, my pleasure to be here. It's gonna be fun.
Did you say my fault?
I said my fun, which is weird. That's kind of a weird way to say it.
That's awesome. No, the fun is all mine. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. So yeah, I have a lot of fascinating questions, for myself, also from some people. I want to start with one by Kevin Rose. You've pioneered many of the tools we use to collaborate, project, contact management, chat. If you had more time, is there anything else you'd like to tackle? What would you dream up, improve? What would you reinvent?
So that's a really good question. And I have an unusual take here, which is that I think that the thing you're working on right now should be your best idea. And if there's another idea that you would prefer to be working on, you ought to be working on that. So I don't actually, at the moment, have anything else I'd rather be working on than Basecamp. I think the problem of how to allow groups to make progress together is a really meaty and interesting problem. And I live it every day because I work at a company and there's people and we're all trying to work together. So I think it's a really meaty and important problem because it affects just about every group, and every company is made of groups of people. So I love that as a meaty problem. And I just feel like if you're thinking about the next thing already, you're kind of not into the current thing. And I think if you want to do a great job of something, you got to be fully absorbed into that. And, I think this is a little bit of a problem actually with sort of the entrepreneurial mindset right now, especially in the tech industry, where everyone's always like thinking about their next thing because they're building companies that are only going to be around for 3 or 4 years. I want to build a company that's going to be around for 30 or 40 years. We've been around for 16 so far. So if I'm always looking for the next thing in my own company and not focused on what I want to really be doing now, then I feel like I'm not thinking about the stuff I need to deal with right now. Now, that said, there may be things that come up in the course of the next 20 years that I can solve here as well. But I'm really pumped about Basecamp 3 in the latest version. I think that's sort of what I'm focused on primarily these days.
And we're going to get into that, but first I want to go a little bit back. When you were in high school or in college, did you think that you'd become an entrepreneur / author? What did you?
I've been an entrepreneur at some level since I've been like 14. Sometimes I was selling some illegal stuff when I was younger. I was also selling some legal things. I've always been selling something or making something. I always had this idea that I'd be working on my own at some level. I have had many jobs over the years, some part-time, some full-time. After college, I worked for someone else for a while. But I've always known that I'm more built to work for myself. That's just sort of how I'm built. I love working with people, but not for people. And so I've always had that feeling, but I didn't know what form it would take. And I still don't know what form it'll take. Like right now, I know what we're doing. In 5 years, we might be doing something that's slightly different. I just don't know. It kind of always have gone with the flow there.
You said selling illegal things. Can you?
Yeah, a little bit. Can I elaborate? I I used to sell like I used to sell like knives and like butterfly knives and like fun stuff like that like young boys kind of like when you're 12 or 13, like you just like that kind of stuff. So like pocket knives, it wasn't technically illegal, but it wasn't really legit, and like people's parents probably weren't happy that I was selling those things. And then we used to sell like cigarettes and chewing tobacco before we were 18. Like a friend's brother was 18, he would buy some stuff and I'd go on my bike and deliver it to people who were 17 and 16 and stuff like that. So I've done a bunch of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not terribly illegal, but it technically was that kind of stuff. Yeah,
that's the tech version of like Jay-Z selling crack at like 15.
Basically, yeah. It wasn't. I wouldn't have gone to jail over this stuff, but it wasn't kosher. Let's put it that way.
How did you and DHH get to know each other? What prompted you guys to just?
Yeah, so David was a sort of a fan of the company. The company had existed for many years, and then I posted something on our blog many years ago. I was learning how to code in PHP, and I didn't know how to do some things. I kind of cobbled some stuff together, but I was like, I'm having trouble with pagination. I don't know how to make it work, right? And so I posted something, and David responded via email. I got a bunch of responses from people, but David's was very thorough, very focused, very concise, and really helpful. And I liked the way he explained himself. And then we went back and forth in a few emails. And I really liked the way he continued to explain himself. And we saw some things eye to eye. He was still in college at the time in Copenhagen. I had a gig that I was doing that I needed some programming help with. And so I hired him to help me with this little project on the side, this thing I was building. It was called Single File. It was a book management program to keep track of all the books you had. And he did that. And we worked together well. And then we did a client project together, and we worked together well. And we just kind of kept working together. And then eventually I hired him full time as an employee. And then eventually he became a partner in the company, because it was clear there was something extra special about him. And so we figured out how to make that work.
Yeah. And what's something that you used to fundamentally believe that you now see as somewhat misguided, whether it's personally or professionally? What's something what are some things?
That's a great question. There's principles I've sort of changed my mind on, which I think are more interesting than specific. So when I was listening to someone, I used to always be formulating in my head a way to push back on what they were saying. Like, I was just working on my alternative while they were talking about what they believed. And that is it's a disease, actually, I think, because it encourages you not to listen and not to be open to other ideas. And eventually I had this experience where someone basically said, hey man, give it 5 minutes. Like, before you react to someone, let something sink in for a while and think it through before you're so sure that you're certain that you're right and they're wrong. And this took me a while to get into and to get used to, but I sort of, maybe about 6, 7 years ago, maybe it wasn't that long, I don't know. Yeah, 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. I had this experience, and it changed me. Since then, I'm way more patient. I'm way more interested in what other people have to say. And I don't come to conclusions quickly. I do after I've considered everything, but I try to be a lot more considerate than I used to be. So I think that's a matter of just growing up a little bit, maturing. But it's
How did you do that?
Say that again?
How did you train yourself to delay that sort of immediate response?
I was at a conference. I wrote about this a while ago. I was at a conference called the Business Innovation Factory, which is a conference that happens every year in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a really excellent conference. Someone was on stage, a guy named Richard Saul Warman, who's the guy who actually started TED and has done a lot of information design work and graphic design work over the years. And he was saying some stuff on stage. And after the talk, I went up to him and tried to immediately just push back on some of his ideas. And this is a guy who was in his 60s at the time, and he's seen a lot in the world. He's pretty wise. And here I am, this punk in my 30s, telling him that he's wrong, or whatever I was telling him. I don't remember exactly what it was. And he's like, dude, give it 5 minutes, man. You haven't even allowed this to possibly sink in. These ideas cannot have gotten through your mind in 2 minutes. It's just not possible. And his point was, it's not just 5 minutes. It's give it some time before you're sure. And he goes, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but you've got to give it time to sink in. And so it was that experience. And then it's just one of those things where I just kind of saw the light, and it was it became more interesting to live that way. I think it's really, really boring to think you're right about everything. It's extremely boring. And it's also very unhealthy. And so that was a really cool moment where I felt like I could be a healthier individual. And it was just an obvious flip in your mind where I should be doing that more often. And I've learned a lot more since then.
Do you meditate?
No, I've tried, and I can't make it work. I will say though, there's a wonderful book I'd recommend. The cover is horrible. And if you see the cover, you'll be like, I'm not buying this book. But it's called The Mayo Clinic Guide to Stress-Free Living, I believe is the name of it. And it's by this scientist at the Mayo Clinic who's written about, it's a little bit about mindfulness. It's about meditation is not a practical solution for most people. It's a wonderful solution for people who really want to practice it, but it's not a practical solution for most people because it takes a long time to really get good at it. And the truth is people don't have a lot of time to get into it. So he has a different way of looking at ways to sort of calm down and think things through. And I think it's a wonderful book. I'd highly, highly recommend everyone check it out. Just don't look at the cover. It's like someone cartwheeling in a field. It's horrible. But the message is fantastic, and it's backed up by some really interesting neuroscience and also some just practical real world examples of these two states of the mind. And it's anyway, I don't want to go into it too much because it'll take the whole hour, but it's a wonderful book. I recommend it. And that's the kind of stuff I'm practicing is his ideas.
Without getting too much into, what would you say is maybe the one big or one of the biggest takeaways from it?
Yeah. So his thing is that there's two modes to the mind. There's the default mode and the focused mode. And the default mode is what we're in most of the time. And it's when the mind is wandering. And the mind tends to wander towards worry. You tend to start to worry about things if you have a lot of spare time. And he talks a lot about anxiety creeping in and people thinking about the emails that they're not responding to or the chats or like all these things you're not doing, you're supposed to be doing, you're not doing. And it starts to, but the focus mode is the mode where nothing else is in your mind except the thing that you're doing. And it might be like if you're looking at a flower really closely, just really studying the flower, you can't have any other thoughts. If you're playing with your kid and you're just like paying close attention to your kid and smiling or something, like you don't have any other thoughts. And the point is that your mind is either wandering or focused. And when you're wandering too much, you worry. So his technique is how to get you back in more to the focused state. So anyway, the big takeaway is a wandering mind is a worried mind. And so it's better to find something to focus on, whatever it is. And it clears your mind pretty quickly, and it just puts you in a happier frame of reference for the rest of the moment. So that's in a nutshell what it is.
Yeah. And speaking of books, I want to get into remote just a little bit. There's some questions around it. If you were to publish that, today, a few years after you published it, what would be, if anything, what would be different? How has that world changed?
Rework specifically? Yeah. There's a couple things I would talk about in that book that I think are extremely important. And one of them is the value of asynchronous collaboration and communication. Right now, there's definitely a trend towards making everything real time, either real time chat or primarily real time chat, but also just like trying to make everything about now. And I find that that's ultimately a really unsustainable place to be in. It elevates a lot of things to now that do not need to be about now. And I think we would talk a lot more about that because I think it has some deeper implications, especially now as more and more people are exploring ditching asynchronous and going more to synchronous or real time. So there'd be a lot of talk about that because I think we didn't really touch on that enough in the book. And we've learned over the past 16 years that there's some real significant, deep, valuable benefits you get from allowing people to think about things for a while before they respond. And I think that's something we would talk a lot more about and something I hope to talk more about down the road. But that's an important topic. I think also
that only because our team has gone full Slack. A lot of teams have gone full real time. What are some things you recommend some teams leave to asynchronous?
Almost everything, except for three or four things. So there are about 3 or 4 things I think chat is especially good at. Number one, quickly hashing something out. Like, I need to throw something in here. I want to get a couple quick opinions or just something like a quick hash out, but you got to leave. It's like you don't want to be in the sauna all day. Sauna, good 10 minutes, get out or you'll die, basically. So like quick hashing things out, really good at that. It's also really good at the social aspect of work. People kind of goofing off and having fun. I think that's another key part of it that's really valuable. Another one is asking a question out loud when you don't know who has the answer or where to find the answer. Like, hey, anyone know what this error message means? Or hey, anyone know the technique to center this text vertically or whatever? Like, you don't know who to talk to necessarily, but someone around will hear the answer or hear it and have an answer. And the last one is like red alerts, stuff that you really, really, truly, absolutely have to know about right now, like a busted something or like something that you would, way back in the day would have like a beeper for, like a really truly important moment that you need to hear about right now. I think everything else is a huge step backwards and ultimately a very dangerous place to be. I think chat leads to significant fear of missing out. The fact is that you feel like you have to be watching this thing all the time or you're not going to be able to contribute. And if you don't contribute now, it's off on the conveyor belt and you won't be able to contribute later. So people are constantly, they have one eye on the chat room and one eye on their work. And I think that that's a really dangerous way I think it's a dangerous way to treat your mind. I think it's unfair to your mind, actually, to have this idea of continuous partial attention. I think it's a really dangerous thing. I think that there's a bunch of other things. I think it's, first of all, like fatiguing and exhausting. I hear this from a lot of people, the feeling that they're basically in if you have a chat room open, you're in an all-day meeting with an unknown set of participants with no agenda. And that is a really, really heavy thing to deal with all day long. So you've got that. I can keep going. But the other thing is, I'll add one more thing, which I think is important, is that chat really encourages you to think one line at a time. And that is not the way to really think deeply about things. And I think that most things that are worth discussing carefully, thoughtfully, and over time. And chat doesn't allow for that. There's some other stuff too, but I'll actually add one more, because one more thing that's on my mind about this we've seen internally. And by the way, the reason I'm saying this stuff is we've actually had, back in 2006, we launched Campfire, which is kind of the first modern chat tool. And we've been around chat as a company longer than pretty much any company around today. So we've sent nearly 10 million lines back and forth in our company alone. So we've learned a ton about this. And one of the really other dangerous things about chat is that there's this idea of implied consensus, which is that if it's said in the chat room and nobody pushes back on it, then you assume that everyone's seen it and agreed to it. But that is not the case, primarily because people have different schedules. People have different windows of availability, and not everybody sees everything all the time. But this idea of implied consensus happens in these places, and it's kind of dangerous. So I'm actually writing up a pretty long essay on this, which hopefully I'll be able to post in a couple weeks, maybe next week or the week after, which will go into detail about all these things. Anyway, I think these are really important topics, and I think as teams begin to shift more towards real time as the primary method, they'll begin to feel these things, and they'll be able to sense that something's wrong, but they don't know what. And I want to kind of explain some of the things that we've learned over the past 10 years about the pitfalls of this, and also some alternatives on how to deal with these things.
And is there any way, you talk companies like Slack and incorporate asynchronous elements into the box?
I'm sure they could. Yeah, I'm sure they could if that's a direction they want to go in, right? So it's all software. Everything's possible. It's a matter of different points of view on how to work. And so if the primary point of view with something like Slack or HipChat or many other chat tools is that the real-time stream is where the value is, then I would imagine they would continue to invest in that. I believe that chat is an extremely valuable piece of the communications puzzle, but a very specific one. I think you have to be very careful about trying to use it for everything. And so with Basecamp, for example, Basecamp 3 has chat built into it, but it also has asynchronous communication built into it. Plus, you can also have conversations in context. So one of the other problems with chat is that conversations in chat rooms are not contextual. They might be contextual to the room name or the channel name, but you don't know in a room what's currently being discussed. And if you scroll back and find a chunk of conversation, you don't know if you've rehashed that 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or 420 scrolls back, because there's no context. And so Basecamp is all about, in a lot of ways, it's about context, but we also have chat in it. So I believe that the optimal way to work is real time sometime, asynchronous most of the time, and context all the time. That to me is the real secret, in my opinion, to having groups make significant progress together and not feel like they're on this never-ending treadmill conveyor belt. So it's a bit there's a philosophy behind it, but I believe this thoroughly and fully. And I think ultimately what you're going to see is there's going to be a few different ways to work that become like certain teams and certain groups feel this is the way, certain teams, certain groups feel this is the way, and there'll be these alternatives, which is wonderful. So I think that's all very healthy and good.
Yeah, I want to ask some broader questions about you as an entrepreneur and advice to other entrepreneurs. First, take me through the first 60 minutes of your day. What are your morning rituals?
My morning, okay, so they're kind of mixed, and the main reason they're mixed now is because we had a kid about 17 months ago, and so like my mornings are shot. Like I don't have mornings anymore, basically. But I'll take you back. I'll take you to what it used to be and what I'd like it to be. Which is that, first of all, any day you wake up is a good day. So that's a big part of it. So just waking up. But I'm going to start talking about the morning by talking about the night before, because I think that the morning is all about the night before. And I thoroughly believe in getting a full good night's sleep, 8 hours at least, if you can, but really going for that. And there's sort of an epidemic in our industry of people feeling like they can not sleep, and they wear it as a badge of honor that I don't sleep. I work 18-hour days. I only got 4 hours last night. Like, you're an idiot if that's what's happening over the time. And actually, if you're not an idiot, you'll actually become an idiot because your brain will stop working, basically. Like, this biology kicks in at some point. Sleep deprivation is one of the most debilitating things that can possibly happen. It's like if they're trying to get a criminal to speak, withholding sleep is far more effective than withholding food. So it's really important that you get a good night's sleep. So the morning starts with the night before. So I always try and get a good 7-8 hours in. And then I try not to like pick my phone up the first thing I do in the morning. I just feel like shining a bright light in your eye the first thing in the morning is probably not a good idea. And I'll typically go downstairs and either make an espresso, or I'll make some matcha green tea. I've got like a little bit of a matcha habit. And I'll do that, and I'll kind of hang out a little bit for a while, and I won't start to get into work, like real work, until 9:30ish. But I'll sort of start to check in on some things, read up on a couple things around 8:30. So I'll get up at like 7, let's say. I find though that I'm most creative at night, so I will often skip hours of work during the day. And then come back to some stuff at night. So my day is sort of staggered based on when I've found I'm most productive. So when I'm not most productive, I'll typically be working on, and this happens in the morning a lot, more administrative tasks, more stuff that doesn't take a lot of creative thinking, just stuff I need to do. So I kind of reserve that for the mornings and early afternoons. And then later afternoons or at night, I'll work on sort of more creative stuff like writing or designing or thinking strategically, something like that. But I used to be a little bit more ritual in the morning, but it's just kind of a mess now.
And have you found over time that you're more creative at night, or sleeping just help with it, or?
Yeah, I think it's because it's dark out, and I think it's because there are just fewer distractions typically at night. Things are hushed down a bit, and there's something about that I think that does it for me. It's like if you close your eyes, you can think deeper. Like your brain actually has more, like, I don't know if this is totally true, but I've heard, I might be off a bit, but like your ocular nerve takes like 10% of your brain power. Just seeing takes a lot of brain power. So some people, you instinctively, like, you close your eyes when you want to think of something really hard. And I feel like nighttime is sort of like that, where it's sort of, it turns off a lot of things visually that normally would be occupying cycles in your mind. And so it just kind of helps me, at least, just sort of get into a zone a little bit more. And I also just know that it's chill, people are sleeping, other people aren't working. It has this vibe to tonight that helps me think better. And it's not something I decided to do, it's just something I've learned about myself over the years. And so I think it's important to optimize your schedule around your natural balances or your natural cycles. I'm very, very much into trying to make sure that our business and individuals follow their natural cycles, including seasons and a variety of other stuff, which we can get into if you want, but it gets a little bit weird. So I'll happily stay away from some of that stuff.
Get into this concept. Tell us more about natural.
Yeah, I believe that businesses and people have seasons and cycles. So I think that people have summers, and forget summer being a certain set of months, but you have summers. Summers are when like you're feeling really good and you're excited about the stuff you're doing. And like you have that. And then you also have fall, which is like you're excited, but you're kind of coming to an end of something. And then you've got winter where it's like maybe you're a little bit more introverted, or maybe you're a little bit more sort of insular, or maybe you just need some downtime. Like I think the idea that people are running at full capacity all the time, all year round, it's just not a natural thing. And I think sometimes we think that we can fake nature out, and I'd rather work with it. I think it's pretty damn smart. And so even at our company, we're sort of seasonal in some of the things we do. So for example, May through October, or May through September, we do 4-day work weeks. So everyone gets Friday off in the summers, right? And we used to do it all year round. But we found that like when you do something all year round, it becomes routine, and then you don't appreciate it at some level. And so I remember when I was growing up, I looked forward to the summers, like school's up and you've got this summer break and you've got summer and you do something else. And so we do that at the company. So we do the 4-day work weeks in the summer because it's something to look forward to, something to get excited about. And then, it comes to an end. And then like, it's a good time to shift into sort of more focused work again. So I just think that people in companies and products and all these things have seasons, and it's good to respect that and not fight too much against it.
Yeah. Do you have any other, daily rituals or weekly rituals that, whether personally or professionally?
I try to set aside at least like 5 hours a week to just thinking. And that means that like part of my job is to think. And I think it typically, I'm saying, it seems like that is a luxury these days, which I find to be unfortunate, that people have time to think things through and to consider fully as a dedicated slice of time versus trying to sprinkle thinking out throughout the day in small, tiny pieces, because that's all the time you have, because things are going by you really fast and you got to react. So at Basecamp in general, we're a very sort of deliberate company. We try and think things through, and I believe in like making sure people have enough space to think and not just react and not knee jerk on things. So that's kind of something I really take very seriously, is trying to make sure that I just have time to think. And I set that aside. Either I do that, it's not like I do it every day at 3 or something like that, because I also, again, want to respect my own sort of cycles. Like sometimes what I eat for lunch has a big effect on how I feel in the afternoon. So if I normally would think at 2, but I had kind of a crappy lunch and I'm sort of tired, I don't want to think when I'm tired. So I'll push that off to when I have more energy, things like that. So it's just about paying attention to who you are and what you're doing and how you feel. I think that those are, that's a really important just ritual in itself, which is feeling yourself and paying attention to yourself. That and being on top of that, I think, is actually the most important ritual, versus like I do the same thing at 3 every day, that sort of thing.
Take us through the thinking process. When you're taking 5 hours a week to do that, is it, do you put a topic on the whiteboard, it's time to think about it, or do you kind of just relax and let ideas come to you? Or
yeah, it's not so. Yeah, that's a great question, and it's kind of a weird one to answer because I don't actually know. What I typically do is I set aside some time and stuff fills my mind, and then I go after the things that I think are interesting. So right now I'm thinking a lot about sort of the value of. I'm realizing the value of asynchronous collaboration. I'm thinking a lot about that right now, because it's something that I keep noticing is a real valuable thing, and I've never really thought about how to explain the benefits of it clearly. So it's just something that's on my mind, and so when I set aside time to just think, that naturally fills the space. And then when I've thought that through, it naturally goes away and something else will come into my mind. So like last year, something I thought a lot about is, do I want to be a CEO of a company? Because I've been doing this for a long time. I'm sort of really miss product work. Do I want to be CEO? And I realized I do want to be CEO, but what I don't want to do is a lot of the day-to-day stuff that was taking up a lot of my time. So I want to get more back into product and more into strategy. And I kind of just like this sort of filled my mind at some point. Something happened where I just started thinking about this thing, and then like it ran its course and then it left. So I try not to be too deliberate about like, I must think about this today, because I think that forcing, this is again about like following the natural rhythms of things, forcing something, it just feels contrived at a certain level. And I want to just kind of like paying, again, this comes back to paying attention. Like if something's on my mind, it's probably worth thinking about. And so if it's not on my mind and I have to shove it into my mind, it's probably not as worth thinking about. So that's kind of how I approach that. I know it's like, I feel like sometimes everyone wants really sort of clear strategy, tactical techniques. Like if you do this, this will work. But I think the one I would always say is just pay attention to yourself. Everyone's very, very different. And paying attention to yourself is like the best thing. It's like kind of some sort of self-awareness is the best sort of tool. That's the real tool, is getting into that, I think, is the important technique.
Yeah. I'm also, I try to once a week on a Saturday typically do a sort of screen-free, no phone or email. People have been taking days of rest for thousands of years, and
yes,
seems to have been working. I'm curious, broadly, when you think of when you hear the term success, who comes to mind? The most strong.
This is going to maybe sound strange, but my cleaning lady. So my cleaning lady has been, I've had her for about 20 years now. She's been working for me. She comes once a week to our house, and she's just like the happiest person, just happy. She loves her job. She works on her own. She lives within her means. She is excited about, she likes to clean. She actually likes cleaning a lot. And she's happy to see us. We're happy to see her. Like, that's the person who pops into my head. And it's not that she doesn't go through bad times and it's not challenging and her life isn't easy. I'm certain of that. I know that for a fact, but she feels successful as hell. And wow, that's what it is. And she feels it. And that's great. That's what it means to me. So like, to me, it's about like, are you content? And I don't mean that in like a settling way, but like, have you reached the point where you're just happy doing what you're doing and you enjoy doing it most of the time and you'd like to do it again many days in a row? Like that's success to me. It's not financial. It's not ego-driven success. I mean, there's always a little bit of that pops in because we're humans and stuff, but that's who pops into my head. And then I've got another friend who's a trainer who's the same way. He's just a happy dude. He's got 2 kids now. He's had a second baby. He's just a happy guy. Every day is a wonderful day for him. He's got great opportunities in his life. He's made something for himself. He's never going to be extremely wealthy. It's not even a thing. It doesn't matter. It's like, he just gets to smile every day and he gets to go home to a great family that he loves. And like, that is it. So that's the kind of stuff that comes into my mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I'm going to start. Yeah. I just flashed back to my parents' cleaning lady, who's also incredibly happy and a real craftsman about and very successful. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are, mostly asking, when people say, how can I become successful? They think more like, how can I become like you or like, Jeff Bezos or whoever. But how can people become more like, your friend that's the trainer or your cleaning lady?
I think a lot of that comes down to just simply paying attention to sort of who's around you, and this comes back to the give it 5 minutes thing again. Like, because Jeff Bezos is enormous. I mean, it'd be hard to say he's not successful, right? There's like a clear definition in sort of success that he has, and he also may be extremely content and all those things also, right? But like, it's easy to define him as successful, but that's actually a pretty slim definition. And the other thing about it is it's a definition of success that very, very, very few people will ever achieve. And so I think it's a really shallow definition. It's hard to attain that, and most likely you will not get there. Like, there's a dozen people in the world at that level, maybe 100. I don't know, right? The odds are so stacked against you. So if you think that that's the only way, then you're going to be miserable. So the good news is that there's examples everywhere of people who are happy, as long as the definition isn't so above everybody that everyone has to be a superhero to be successful. So I think you got to just reframe the definition and not think it's about being a superhero, but instead it's being happy with what you're doing, happy with where you are. Sure, you still want to get better and you still want to grow, but that's part of it too. And smiling and feeling good about what you do and feeling good about the work you do and taking a real pride in your job and your life and your family and all those things. That definition is far more attainable. And I think I guarantee everybody who's listening right now, there are a dozen people orbiting you who are wildly successful, who actually forget wildly. We don't even need to add that superlative, just successful around you that you may not even consider because your definition is wrong. So I think that's the thing. Change the definition.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm curious, this question is from Hannah. Are there things or activities that you consider to be, a real waste of time that other people may not consider?
I don't know. I think one of the sort of really good skills to develop in life is to figure out what's worth doing and what isn't. And most things aren't actually worth doing. Now that's a super broad and general statement that's like impossible to like quantify or qualify or whatever. But a lot of things we spend our time on is wasted. And I know this because, like, to bring it back to work for a moment, when we work in the summer, when we do our 32-hour work weeks versus 40, just about the same amount of work gets done than gets done in 40 weeks or 40 hours. And the point is that when you have less time, you squeeze out a lot of stuff that doesn't actually matter. And what you're left with is the stuff that does. And so when I hear people talking about working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, first thing I think is you're wasting a lot of time. 40 hours is a ton of time to get all the stuff that matters done. And there's a lot of extra time you're probably spending. And I think a lot of people are wasting a lot of time paying attention to chat, paying attention to conversations that don't need to happen right now. And what's happening is that you have less and less time to actually do the work. So you end up spending more hours, not because there's more work to do, but because you're not actually doing the work anymore during the day. And so you have to expand your hours to finally get to the stuff you were supposed to do during the day that you were paying attention to things that didn't matter. So I've just found that compression, actually, when you compress something, like, you squeeze out a lot of the stuff that doesn't need to be there. And what you're left with is the core. And so getting used to and getting good at that is takes a lot of years of practice. And I'm still practicing it, but I feel like I'm getting better and better at it over time. But being conscious of, like, every time you, like, even for a week, a good way to do this is, like, for a week, be extra vigilant about your attention. And don't think about time, think about attention, and say, what deserves my attention right now? Because time and attention are two very different things. Time, let's say, for sake of argument, you have 8 hours a day of time. You probably have 3 to 4 hours a day of attention. You have less attention than you have time, because every time you context shift, you lose moments where you can actually pay attention. And context shifting is a very it erodes a lot of focus, and it's really bad for your day, I think, for the most part. A little bit is fine and it happens, but too much of it and you just chip away at the edges of other attention. So think about your attention versus your time, and keep it, like, really be vigilant. Do I need to do this right now? Is this worth my attention? Because your attention is a zero-sum game. You have to basically pay full attention to something if you really are giving it your attention. Time you can spend on a bunch of things at once. You can multitask, but multitasking is not paying attention. So I think that's how I think about it. Respect your attention and pay attention to it and see what happens with that.
I really have me thinking about this, especially the chat component, because I think I'm saving so much time by not emailing my team, but really I'm just on chat all day.
Well, what happens is, let me get a little bit deeper on that, and that's true. The other thing is that every time you speak up in a chat room, typically, in settings and all the different products are different, the whole thing, but you're incrementing an unread something for someone else. So your little thing is ultimately an opportunity to pull someone else away from what they're doing. And so the thing is that in group chat, especially, one little thing is shot out to 9, 10 people at once. Everyone else is probably doing something else. And now that little thing is like interrupted people. And you could say, well, they don't have to be paying attention, but that's the whole point of chat in many ways, is that it's real time. And so if you're not paying attention to it, there are better ways to talk. So it's like, this is the thing, is that it ricochets. Like every time you say something, it ricochets in 8 directions, assuming there's 8 people, and it creates an opportunity for other people to be distracted as well. So we're extremely careful about that here, and we still aren't great at it. We still like fall into the trappings of that. But I just consider the impact of statements and tossing links in and stuff that aren't necessary all the time, and think about like how that actually impacts people on the outside. So just keep it in mind, for even just try it for a week. Like, what if we were quieter, and what if we were more asynchronous, where I wrote something somewhere else in a medium that was not requiring people to be paying attention to it at the moment, but we checked. Maybe email is probably not the best path either, but let's say you did. Let's say you went back to email for a week and said, we're going to check our email 3 times a day, and the rest of the time we're just going to work on the things we're supposed to be working on. Like, what would actually happen? It's sort of it's an interesting moment to think about that. And you probably, there'd be some withdrawal. You're like, I need to ask people stuff all the time, but you're like, do I really need to get this answer from someone right now? So it's just a matter of like experimenting with that again and getting a feel for it. So anyway, and by the way, I'm not anti-chat at all. Like, we have chat in Basecamp. I'm anti-chat as a hammer for every nail. I think that's the problem, and I think a lot of people are sort of trying to use it for too many things right now.
It'd be cool if there was a sort of, and maybe there is, I'm just not using it, sort of buffer for these types of things. Even email, with like all of the emails would come in at a certain time when I allocated, like, this is when I'm going to check my email. And
yeah,
before then,
cool. Yeah, that's cool. It's almost like, I mean, it's basically like a digest. It's similar to like old school email newsletters, where you can like subscribe to a digest. And you're like, I can absorb this stuff once a day or twice a day. Every 6 hours, send me a summary, something like that. Like, that's it. Very, 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 very few things need to be dealt with right now. Very few things. Yet the medium can cause you to elevate everything to that level of criticality, and that's sort of the problem, I think, sometimes. So anyway, just riff on that.
Definitely.
Keep an eye on it.
Let me ask this, and this is a broad question that tells me what you think about the world a little bit. If you were coming out of college in 2015, giving the skills and interests that you have, what would you do first? Would you start building Basecamp right away? Would you build something else? Would you go work at Facebook or some other company to build your skills?
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's a really, really good and important question. I think, first of all, you've got to know who you are, but you might not know who you are yet. That's the thing. I remember when I was 21 and coming out of school, I didn't really know. I knew I kind of wanted to do something by myself, but I actually ended up taking a job. So I went to school in Arizona. I moved to San Diego and took a job as a web designer at this company for 3 months. Even though I knew in my heart that I was an entrepreneur, I went and did this because it was like steady pay. And that was actually a good experience for me, because it clarified a lot of things for me. So I think that one thing I would actually suggest people do is not immediately go to work. I think that it might be nice for a year to do a little bit of traveling, if you can afford to do that, or to do something real shoestring that's not work for a year, because I think it's good to take a pause from like spending your whole life actually working at school, and then like switching to a new job, which is working out of school, and just having a little buffer. But by the time you get back to that, I think it'd be about like, who are you and how do you feel about things? Like, there's no question that going to work at a company like Facebook would be valuable. There's just no question in my mind that that would be an extremely valuable experience. And there's parts of me who wish that I had that experience, or working at Google, or working at some big huge corporation, just to see what that world's like. And also to be certain corporations like Facebook, certainly, and Google have incredibly smart people, and just to be able to soak that in and feel that would, I think, be extremely valuable. So I would, if you don't have this immediate, actually the way I would look at it is this: if you don't have an idea that you really care about right now, don't start a business. Instead, go work somewhere until you have the idea. There's a lot of people who want to play entrepreneur. They don't know what the hell they want to do yet, but they want to play entrepreneur. And so they just kind of like pivot around, you know? And it's like, go work somewhere else and get some wonderful experience and get around some smart people. And you may meet your future founder, or you may meet a future coworker, you know, go do that. I would, unless you have this burning thing that you need to fix in the world, and no one else is doing it, and it's going to take you to get it done. So that'd be my
Even
suggestion.
before that, in college, you have kids. So a couple questions around that. One is, will your kid go to college similar to Stanford or Harvard? So if you were designing, college.
Yeah, I think higher education is very broken. And I would assume, so my kid's like just about a year and a half old. There's no chance that he's going to go to a school like I went to. And what I mean by that is like a big university that has a traditional sort of thing. I think if that happens, it's going to be a real failure, societal failure. I think that, to me, what schools should be teaching, and some schools do this, by the way, but I'm talking in general, problem solving should be the major. It shouldn't be like anything other than that, because everything changes. Problems don't go away, though. And the way you can be a critical thinker and look at something and try and figure out how to solve it, that's the real skill. Like if you study computer science, 5 years, 6 years later, there's going to be a new language that comes out. And yeah, you might understand computers and you might understand some of the logic and stuff that goes into that. But the real thing is you need to be a problem solver. And if you really love computers and you love programming, you can learn the languages on your own. But you don't know what the language is going to be, you know? So like, and the same thing is true for a lot of skills that you do in school, and then the world changes and like that skill doesn't matter anymore. Problem solving is a skill. I think it'll always be relevant. Certainly artificial intelligence and computers might solve some of the problems. But if that's the case, like the only safe job then is to be a plumber. And that's not a bad idea either, actually, which is to take up a very specific trade that can't be replaced by robots, because it does appear that robots and artificial intelligence may take up a lot of information jobs down the road too. So there's some really interesting things there, but I think solving problems will always be always be at a premium. And people will always want people around them who can see the world and see a different solution, figure out how to navigate problems and solve them. So those would be the skills I'd love for anybody to work on and invest in. And I just don't feel like the higher education system is really built around that so much, unfortunately.
How do you mentioned artificial intelligence, how do you make sense of how, humans and how we'll be able to interact with it? What are you excited about or scared about, or what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know anything. I don't know enough about it. I think it's probably going to be a mix of great and bad, just like most things. A lot like I'm talking like way out of school because I don't know enough about it, but I think that there certainly are a lot of things that I'm sure computers can do better than humans, and that humans would be better at spending their time on, and so outsourcing or offloading some of those things I think would be really valuable. But I don't know. I mean, who knows like what it looks like. I think it is. I think like I understand like Elon Musk and who is it? Musk is nervous about it. Bill Gates is nervous about it. Like it's scary. It's this new thing. It's like it's actually the first competition we may have ever had as a species. Not ever, but actually in the last 50,000 years or something. Like actually true. There's no other intelligent beings at our level on this planet. And we've seen what an intelligent being, us, can do to the planet and do to other species, which is we typically hold them down and destroy them. Like, unfortunately, we're destroying the planet in a lot of ways. We're killing a lot of species. We're treating the planet with a big lack of respect. That's because of our intelligence. And that's what makes me a little bit nervous about something that's as intelligent or potentially more intelligent than us, is we've seen what intelligence does. It's good for the host, bad for the guests. So we consider ourselves the hosts of this planet, unfortunately, and it's bad for the guests. So I'm curious about what will happen with another intelligent, sentient sort of concept amongst us. What's going to happen there? So I'm nervous about that, but I don't know. It'll probably be great too. Who knows? Interesting times for sure.
Yeah. And on that optimistic note, we'll close the interview.
Yeah. We're all going to die.
Yeah. A few more questions. So I'm curious how you've written a lot about being a entrepreneur, and there's a lot of literature about that just in general. How have you thought about being or educating yourself as a father and builder of a family? Like, how have you thought?
Yeah, it's taught me that it actually has changed. I mean, my son's really young, so like I can't talk to him yet. I mean, talk, but he can't really talk back yet. So, I get the sense that my job on this planet is clearer in some ways, which is like helping someone hopefully see things in a unique way and solve problems and help to guide someone through the world a little bit, and so they become a great human being, and sort of not solve their problems for them, but help them figure things out on their own, sort of. And I'm seeing that as really my job ultimately as a CEO of a company too, which is if I'm jumping in and trying to fix everything, or if I'm jumping in and trying to solve everything, or I see the solution and I know it's clear, but someone else is working on it and I jump in and solve it for them, I'm not helping them at all. I'm not helping anybody. I should help where I'm needed. And I should help other people see things that they might not be able to see yet. Like those are the things that I've realized are really valuable traits, things that I can do. Sort of serve as like an editor in chief, where I'm just kind of helping guide things and keep things sort of pointing in the right direction and helping people see something that they don't see or consider a point they haven't considered, and sort of sitting back and speaking last, actually, in many ways, is sort of what I'm trying to do more of. And I've noticed that if I was an overbearing parent and telling my kid exactly what to do and holding him away from making a mistake, and I'm already like struggling with this, where I see my kid, he's like, I know he's going to hurt himself in 1 second because he's going to like bump his head on this corner, but I got to let him do that actually. And then he'll know for himself not to do it again. Or he may have to do it 3 times, but he'll know. But if I always pull him away from that corner, he'll never learn anything. And I think that that's true in at work too. So I've had a tendency in the past to like, if I see something going off the rails early, or like if I see an idea that's, I think the obvious solution, but people can't see it, I would tend to jump in and like present that or suggest that. But I've learned to kind of stand back a bit, and help maybe nudge people to it. Like if you can imagine someone's looking this way, and if I can just kind of turn them a little bit so their eyes are facing forward and they see something else that was out of their field of view before, that's it. That's what I think my job is in a lot of ways. And so I think that having a kid has sort of taught me that in some ways.
So how did you come to realize?
Well, I wasn't always best at that or good at that, and I'm not sure I am good at it yet either. But I mean, like I've been doing this since I've been like doing website design, software design, programming stuff, computery things for like 20 years now. So since about '96, really, is when I graduated college, and I've changed a lot over the years and learned a lot of things. I used to be a lot more hands-on with the work itself, and my skills there have like atrophied at some level. I'm slower at like building things than I used to be personally, because I haven't been in it as much. So my skills have changed, and you have to be okay with that. And sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm annoyed that I can't build something that I used to be able to build. Like I could, but it would take me an extra 2 weeks, and I'm like, I don't have the time to do that. So I end up delegating it to somebody else, and it's like I really struggle with that sometimes. But I also just recognize that that's just how my job has evolved, and I need to be aware of that and not fight it, and just be like, this is the way it is. And if I want to get back into doing the work permanently, I can't be the CEO of a company. I probably would have to start my own company, like again by myself, doing consulting or something like that. So it's more of a skill development over time, and you get better at different things, and you plateau at certain things, and just being aware of that, I think, is really valuable.
What do you think you are best at? Like, what is your?
I hope clarity is what I'm best at, which is explaining my thoughts clearly, communicating things clearly to other people, and helping people see things clearly. Like that's what I hope I'm really good at. It's what I pride myself in. So I certainly hope I'm good at that. And it's what I really enjoy getting better at. So that's it in many ways.
And how do people get better at knowing what's worth doing and discerning what's?
I think looking back at what you've done and going, where do we end up? Where do we start? Where do we end up? And what do we do in the middle? And like, could we have ended up somewhere a lot faster? Like what was all the stuff in the middle? And I think that's the thing you got to look at, is like, what was the stuff in the middle that we felt we had to do to get to the conclusion? And can we sort of skip that, or skip most of that, or skip much of that to get to a conclusion sooner? Because I think it's a lot of stuff in the middle, like, that ends up taking a lot more time than it needs to. Again, it's not like a specific thing. It's just like because there are very, very few direct recommendations I can give somebody where it's like, yeah, that's how you do it. Like, this is a process. It's a frame of mind. It's a mindset. It's a way you approach the world. It's a way you look at things. And those things are the products of many different inputs. And so it's like, how do you get better at playing the guitar? Well, you say you practice, but what does that mean? Like, what do you practice? Well, people practice in different ways. There's deliberate practice. It's like every time you make a mistake, you got to go back and fix that before you move on. There's other practice where you play the whole song and you try and get a whole song right versus like a certain chord or a certain, measure. Like, there's different ways to practice, and there's different techniques. And some of those things would involve like strengthening your fingers or strengthening your hand-eye coordination. And it's like too hard to be like, you can't say, if you do this at guitar, you will be better at it. It's more like, how do you want to approach practicing? It's kind of, I guess, a nice way to think about this. Like, how would you approach figuring out what's important, is to look back at the things you've done and reconsider them and go, was it worth doing all of that work? Did we just do it because we thought we were supposed to? I see a lot of designers go through these extensive wireframe processes and like extensive research processes, like, because they think that you have to do that all the time. And there might be some times when you have to do that, but a lot of things you can just make a call on. Think about it for a day or two, make a call, and you could save yourself 4 weeks. And as you figure that stuff out, you might realize that I don't need to do all these things that don't matter. I thought they mattered because I thought it was part of a process I had to do. But as I look back on it now, I realized that I was just kind of going through the motions. And so I think figuring out how you can cut out the going through the motions feeling, it will get you there.
Yeah.
And by the way, I actually have I gotta run in 1 minute, so I'm just letting you know.
Perfect. Yeah, just up close. That's an awesome note to end on. Jason, thank you for a fantastic interview. Any last minute plugs people should know of what's upcoming from your end?
Plugs. I mean, Basecamp 3 is our thing. It's the best version we've ever made before. And people who've looked at Basecamp in the past, you should look at it again, because it's very different. It has a very different point of view than most things you're probably used to working on today. So I'll throw that pitch in and plug in, and that's it. I just think, have a great day, have fun. Thanks for having me on here. This is always, I love answering questions like this. And by the way, your questions are really, really good. Questions that hadn't been asked before. So I feel really good right now. That was fun. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it, Jason. I'll let you get to your call. Have a great day. Thanks. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good one. Okay, give it up for Jason. Obviously, we are all huge fans of his work and readers for a very long time. So definitely check out Basecamp 3 and give a shout out to Jason on Twitter at Jason Fried, and let him know that that you appreciate him. Thank you guys for another day of Product Hunt Live. This was a fantastic double header with a poet in the beginning, and now Jason Fried, obviously entrepreneur and author. And stay tuned for a lot more coming. As always, thank you to the incredible Blab team that makes this happen. Shout out to Sean and Hannah and all of our other friends out there. And shout out to the Product Hunt team that also makes this happen as well. Emily and Lucas and Mike and Andreas and all the engineers who make this possible. If you like what you see or have any feedback for you other guests you want to see, please recommend them to @Product Hunt or @Eric Torenberg or @Product Hunt Live, and we will make that happen. We're doing a few blabs a week, and we listen to audience recommendations. Okay, awesome. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time on it. episode of Product Hunt Live. Peace.